Hey guys, tonight we are wandering far back in time into a world of dusty hills, restless animals, and long shadows that stretch from sunrise to sunset. You're stepping into the life of a shepherd in Biblical Judea. Think about that for a moment. No cell phone, no GPS, not even a decent pair of sneakers. Just your feet, your flock, and the endless hills of stone and scrub. You probably wouldn't survive this job for more than a week. Let us be honest. But tonight, you Dante have to. You just get to listen, get cozy, and let someone else do the heavy lifting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're re-listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing all the different places and time zones tuning in. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sky is still ink dark when you stir. Sheep shift around you, their faint bleats breaking the silence of dawn. You're lying on a rough wool cloak, a stone for a pillow. It's not exactly luxury accommodation, but in this time and place, you don't expect comfort. You expect survival. The first glimmer of light stretches over the hills, pink brushing the horizon, and for a brief moment, the air feels cool and forgiving. You stand slowly, stretching tired limbs. The land around you is not lush like storybook meadows. It's a stubborn landscape, rocky ridges and scrubby patches of grass. The Judean hills have never been generous, yet they've raised generations who learned to live off their sparse offerings. You rub sleep from your eyes and count the flock in the grey light. They stir and shuffle, noses already sniffing for food. Sheep never wait politely for their caretaker's morning coffee. A shepherd's life begins with this counting ritual. One by one, you tick them off in your head. There's something calming about it, though sometimes you wonder if it esched this very rhythm of monotony that later inspired stories of kings and prophets speaking in parables about sheep and shepherds. A missing one means trouble, predators, thieves, or a simple tumble into some rocky crevice. This morning, they all seem present, though one limps slightly, a reminder that today you'll need to keep an extra eye on him. The sun finally breaks the horizon, throwing golden light across the stony slopes. Shadows stretch like fingers, and the bleating grows more insistent. You whistle sharply, a sound the flock knows well, and they cluster toward you. In the quiet of dawn, that whistle carries far. The kind of sound that becomes second nature when you spend your life outdoors. You sling a leather pouch over your shoulder, checking the contents. A bit of bread wrapped in cloth, a handful of olives. Your water skin, not as full as you'd like, but enough to get started. In your right hand rests the staff, not just a walking stick, but the extension of your arm. A guide for stubborn sheep and, when needed, a defensive tool. There's also the sling tucked into your belt, a strip of leather that can hurl stones at startling speed. People often think of shepherds as passive figures, but you know the truth. This job requires vigilance and readiness for sudden violence, even if most of the day is spent waiting. The air warms quickly in this land. Within minutes of sunrise, the cool dampness vanishes, leaving dry heat in its place. You pull your cloak tighter, more for sun protection than warmth. Cloaks here are versatile things. Bedding at night, shield by day, and sometimes even a bag if you knot the corners. Practicality rules over fashion. Nobody is checking your outfit on these hills. As you guide the sheep toward the morning grazing spots, your eyes sweep the horizon. The hills roll unevenly, like waves frozen in stone. Between them lie dry gullies where scrub plants cling, and beyond that, distant villages sit like specks. Somewhere out there, farmers rise from their homes. Merchants open shutters, and priests prepare morning offerings at the temple in Jerusalem. But for you, there is only this flock. The world feels reduced to their steady movement and the crunch of your sandals on gravel. Mainstream historians point out that shepherds in this region lived on the fringes of society, often viewed with suspicion, even seen as rough or untrustworthy. Yet, paradoxically, they appear in some of the most cherished stories of faith. From David's rise, from shepherd boy to king, to shepherds being the first to hear of miraculous births, the contradiction is almost funny. Society looks down on you, but its most sacred texts can't stop talking about you. As you move the flock, you notice small signs of life. A bird darting overhead, the faint scent of wild thyme crushed underfoot, a lizard sunning itself on a rock. The land may seem barren to outsiders, but to you it's alive with details. There's even a quirky little practice you remember from your father. Smearing sheep with a mix of oil and herbs to keep flies from laying eggs in their ears. It smells awful, but it works. And historians still argue whether such remedies were common knowledge across Judea or just localized shepherd tricks passed down in families. Either way, you keep a small jar of the mixture tucked into your pouch, because you'd rather not lose a sheep to something as ridiculous as ear maggots. The sheep fan out now, noses to the ground, tugging at tufts of grass and weeds. Their bleating softens into contented munching. For a moment, you just stand there, leaning on your staff, watching them eat. It's a scene that hasn't changed in thousands of years. No tractors, no fences, just animals, and the one human charged with guiding them. You feel the sun climbing, the sky turning brighter, and you know the day's rhythm is locked in. By evening, you'll be exhausted. But for now, in this early hour, you breathe deep, letting the morning settle around you. The world is slow, the hills endless, and the flock is safe. That's all you need. The sheep do not care for your peaceful mood. Their needs are constant, their hunger loud, and their movement scattered like marbles rolling across uneven ground. You press forward with them, staff tapping occasionally against a stubborn flank, nudging them away from stony patches where nothing grows. Their heads dip low, tearing at anything green, and you realize that the morning routine is not a sprint, but a long, careful shuffle. The ground here is a patchwork of loose stones, tufts of grass, and thorny scrub that seems designed to snag both wool and ankles. You guide the flock toward a slope where last week rains left behind a fragile blush of greenery. The air is already warming. The kind of warmth that promises by noon it will bake the earth into a shimmering oven. But for now, in these early hours, there is still dew clinging to some blades, and the sheep know it. Their eagerness quickens your own steps. You stoop briefly, inspecting the limping sheep from earlier. His hoof is chipped, not broken. You run a thumb over the jagged edge and make a mental note. Later, when the heat slows everything down, you'll smooth it against a flat stone. Until then, you coax him forward with soft clicks of your tongue. A shepherd must always balance compassion with pragmatism. The weak cannot be abandoned. Yet neither can the flock be stalled to long for once. The tools of your day make themselves useful immediately. The staff extends your reach, letting you sweep sheep aside without stepping into thorns yourself. The sling, though idle now, weighs on your belt like an insurance policy. You carry a pouch of smooth stones collected on earlier walks, river-rounded pebbles that fit neatly into the leather cradle. Children in the village sometimes laugh at shepherds practicing with slings, but you know better. A well-aimed shot can send a predator fleeing, or, if truly needed, strike it down. Legend even claims young shepherds honed their skills this way long before they fought in wars. You believe it. Your cloak, wrapped around your shoulders, flutters as a breeze moves through the hills. The mornings can deceive you. While warmth creeps in, sudden gusts sweep across the valleys. The cloak guards you from both extremes, and though it smells of sheep, smoke, and sweat, you wouldn't trade it for silk. You know too well that silk tears at the first thorn. As you climb a ridge, you pause to sip from your wine. The leather squeaks faintly as you press it, the liquid lukewarm but refreshing. You ration carefully. Too much now, and you'll curse your thirst by midday. The sheep nose the ground, oblivious, finding hidden chutes between stones. Their teeth tear quickly, reminding you that grazing is both fragile and fleeting. Once the patch is eaten, you'll have to lead them onward. The landscape stretches wide beneath the rising sun. From this ridge, you glimpse terraces cut into distant hillsides, where farmers tend stubborn fig trees and vines. To the east lies a wadi, dry now but capable of flooding after sudden rains. Beyond that, faint traces of a caravan route shimmer, already marked by the slow trudge of traders carrying spices, oils, and textiles between towns. You're far removed from such commerce, but you're aware of it. Every path through these hills carries stories of goods, people, and sometimes armies. Mainstream history tells us that shepherds were the backbone of pastoral economies here, essential for wool, milk, and meat. Yet society often viewed them with suspicion. They lived apart, slept outdoors, and wandered across boundaries without regard for fences. Some records even suggest shepherds were barred from giving legal testimony because their reputations were too rough. And still, paradoxically, religious poetry described God as a shepherd, the very role people distrusted. The irony is not lost on you as you lean on your staff, watching your sheep gnaw weeds. As you move again, a quirky tidbit comes to mind. Shepherd boys often played a game with thorns, weaving them into crude crowns to pass the time. They would press them lightly onto each other's heads, laughing at the sting. It was childish, almost silly, yet the memory of it lingers. You remember bleeding once from such play, your scalp tender for days. Who knew that years later, thorn crowns would take on heavier, darker symbolism in tales passed through generations? Historians still argue whether those games were truly common or whether later storytellers exaggerated such childhood diversions. But to you, the recollection is simple and personal, an echo of long days with nothing but sheep and the sun for company. The sheep wander now toward a narrow path cut into the hillside. Rocks jut out like teeth, and thorn bushes cluster along the edge. You whistle again, sharper this time, to guide them through in single file. The sound bounces strangely against the rock walls, echoing back as if another shepherd were hidden nearby. You chuckle under your breath. This landscape has a way of playing tricks on lonely ears. You press forward, sandals crunching grit, eyes constantly scanning. Predators do not wait for invitations. A wolf, a jackal, even a snake can appear suddenly. Most days are uneventful, yes, but uneventful does not mean careless. The staff in your hand feels reassuring as you tap it rhythmically against stones, its knock echoing like a heartbeat. The sun climbs higher, shadows shortening. Already the hills begin to shimmer faintly with heat. Sweat beads along your forehead, dripping into your beard. The sheep, however, continue their steady rhythm of grazing, bleating softly when jostled by neighbors. Their simple persistence drives you forward. Morning in Biblical Judea is never glamorous. It is not painted with golden perfection, but marked by dust, effort, and repetition. Yet there is also a quiet peace in it, the kind that seeps into your bones. A reminder that while empires rise and fall, the sheep still need guiding, and someone must rise with the dawn to do it. The tools you carry are not just accessories, they are the backbone of your work, as important as the flock itself. Each one has been shaped by generations of use, passed from hand to hand, whispered about in stories, and quietly tested against the stubbornness of sheep and the unpredictability of the wild. You feel their weight on you as you move, familiar, reliable, like extensions of your body. The staff is the most obvious, tall and curved at the top. Its crook is useful for snagging a sheep by the leg or neck when it veers too far, though the sheep never thank you for it. The wood itself has been rubbed smooth by years of use, polished unintentionally by sweat and oil. It is heavy enough to knock aside a thorn bush, strong enough to defend against a wolf, and steady enough to serve as your walking support across treacherous ground. When your hand closes around it, you remember your father's staff. Shorter, darker wood, carved with simple marks along its length. He would tap each notch when he was counting sheep, as though those grooves held memory in themselves. You sometimes think of carving your own, though you haven't yet found the right words to etch into wood. Then there is the sling, humble but dangerous. Strips of leather, worn soft from constant folding, with a pouch in the middle where stones sit before being launched. It may look like a child's toy to outsiders, but you know the sound it makes. That sharp whir as the leather cuts air, followed by the crack of a stone striking rock. Shepherd boys compete for accuracy, aiming at tree trunks or balancing stones on ledges. But you use it more practically. A well-aimed throw at the dirt in front of a wolf can frighten it off without injury. Still, the knowledge lingers that if you needed to, you could aim directly and lethally. It is no wonder legends speak of shepherds defeating giants with slings. In truth, the sling is simply the shepherd's bow and arrow, refined by endless boredom into deadly skill. Your cloak is less glamorous, yet you would never trade it. A single square of heavy wool, scratchy on bearskin, but indispensable. At night, it shields you from cold winds, curled around you as blanket and roof all in one. By day, it drapes across your shoulders, shading you from the fierce sun. When you squat by a fire, it doubles as a seat, and in emergencies, it becomes a carrying sack, tied by its corners to hold supplies, or even a weak sheep that cannot keep pace. It smells of lanolin and smoke, faint traces of herbs, and, unavoidably, sweat. It is not clean, but it is honest. In this world, honesty matters more than cleanliness. The waterskin swings at your side, another quiet companion. It is crafted from goat hide, treated and sealed to prevent leaks. You fill it at springs when you find them, rationing carefully. The water is never crisp or pure in taste. It often carries the tang of leather or the faint bitterness of minerals. Yet each sip keeps you moving, and without it, the day would not be possible. Sometimes you daydream of cool cisterns in villages, water drawn with ropes and clay jars. Out here, water is a prize, and your skin is the fragile link between life and thirst. You carry a small pouch as well, tied with leather thongs. Inside are things others might overlook. A few olives, a bit of bread, a scrap of cheese if fortune smiles. Herbs for smearing on wounds, and smooth pebbles chosen for the sling. There is even a bone needle tucked inside for repairing sandals or stitching a torn cloak. These items weigh little, but their value is immense. Each one represents foresight, the knowledge that out here no one is coming to rescue you. You are your own cook, medic, guard, and craftsman. Scholars often debate whether shepherds in Judea were solitary or communal. Some argue that they roamed alone, bound only to their flock, surviving by instinct and vigilance. Others believe they worked in small groups, sharing watch duties, swapping stories by fires. The truth likely varied, depending on land, season, and wealth. Yet, in your hands, the tools feel personal. They belong to you alone, worn in ways no one else would recognize, carrying the shape of your grip, the mark of your daily habits. A quirky thought crosses your mind, that sometimes you talk to these tools as though they were companions. You whisper to your staff when it strikes a stubborn stone. You scold your waterskin when it leaks. You praise your sling when a shot flies true. Historians still argue whether shepherds truly anthropomorphized their tools, or whether this is just something board workers have always done. But alone in the hills, with only sheep for company, conversation must flow somewhere. The sun rises higher, gilding the edges of the staff, heating the leather of the sling, warming the coarse wool of the cloak. These tools bear the same sun you do. They have been beaten by dust, soaked by rain, and frozen in night air. They are battered but enduring. Much like yourself, you lean on the staff, adjust the cloak, sip from the water skin, and finger the smooth stones in your pouch. Each motion is routine, yet ritualistic, the small ceremonies of survival. The sheep glance up occasionally, ears twitching, then lower their heads again to the ground. They do not care what you carry or how you carry it. To them, you are simply the one who guides, the one whose presence steadies their panic. But to you, every tool is a lifeline. Without them, you would be just another wanderer in the hills, vulnerable and empty-handed. With them, you are a shepherd, overlooked, perhaps, but prepared. The flock shifts steadily, their bodies pressing forward as though they share one mind. Though in truth they are easily distracted, each chasing a patch of grass that looks slightly greener than the last. You guide them into a narrow valley where the land opens toward rough, rocky paths. These trails have been carved, not by design, but by centuries of hooves, human feet, and the stubborn movement of animals searching for pasture. The path is not smooth. Stones jut upward like broken teeth, threatening to trip both man and beast. Your sandals scrape across them, the leather straps rubbing against your skin. You've repaired them so many times that the stitching has become a patchwork story of your journeys. As you walk, the staff clicks rhythmically against the ground, marking each step like a drumbeat. The sheep do not march in orderly lines. They bunch together in some places, then scatter at others, nudging one another, kicking up dust that rises into the warming air. The scent of lanolin mixes with the dry smell of earth, a blend so familiar you hardly notice it anymore. Yet, if a stranger were to walk into this valley, that musky sheep odor would be the first thing they'd mention. You, however, are nose-blind to it. It is simply the smell of your life. Rocks and thorns are not the only challenges here. The land itself seems designed to test your patience. You notice patches of scrubby bushes with tiny, sharp spines. They clutch at the wool of passing sheep, tugging tufts free. Later, those tufts may be collected for spinning. But for now, they are just a nuisance, and your staff is busy nudging the animals away before they get tangled. The sheep do not learn. They walk into thorns today, just as they walked into thorns yesterday, and as they will again tomorrow. The air is alive with subtle sounds. Birds dart above you, their wings slicing the silence. A cicada buzzes somewhere in the stones. Your own sandals crunch softly, and every so often a sheep bleats in complaint. Maybe because a neighbor brushed too close, maybe because the sun is already warming its thick coat. Together, these noises weave into a tapestry of sound that only a shepherd would call ordinary. From the ridge above, you pause to scan the land. Your eyes sweep for any sign of movement beyond the flock. The sudden dart of a jackal, the sleek coil of a snake warming itself on a rock, or the shimmer of another shepherd's staff. The hills seem quiet, but quiet does not mean safe. Historians still argue whether shepherds of this era carried weapons beyond their staff and sling. Some claim they bore short knives for both utility and defense. Others insist those were luxuries for wealthier men. You know the truth for yourself. Even a simple sharpened knife is useful, whether to cut rope, prepare food, or, in the worst case, drive away danger. In the folds of your cloak you keep one. Plain iron, the handle wrapped with strips of hide. It is not impressive, but it serves. As you descend into the rocky terrain, you recall stories told by elders about predators in these hills. Wolves are the most feared. Silent, coordinated hunters that can scatter a flock in heartbeats. Jackals, smaller but bold, nip at lambs. Even eagles pose threats, their sharp talons targeting the smallest of the young. Yet not all dangers have fur or feathers. The terrain itself has claimed sheep, a loose rock tumbling into a gully, a lamb slipping and breaking a leg. You remember once pulling a sheep free from between two boulders, its fleece stripped raw as it thrashed in panic. Your staff bore the scratches for weeks afterward. The sheep press onward, trusting your guidance, though they hardly understand it. You whistle low, then higher, the notes shifting to direct them. It is a language of sound, one you've shaped with years of use. A sharp click with your tongue means hurry. A drawn-out whistle means turn. They respond more to tone than meaning. But it works, and that's what matters. Here's a quirky detail. Some shepherds tie small bells around the necks of older sheep. The jingling helps keep track of the flock, especially when the terrain hides them from view. You remember one shepherd who swore his lead sheep walked with a swagger just to make the bell ring louder, as though proud of the sound. Whether sheep can feel pride is doubtful, but the story lingers, told with a smile on tired evenings. As the path winds upward again, the sun climbs with it. Heat begins to press against your shoulders. Sweat trickles along your temple, soaking into your beard. Your cloak shields part of you, but your arms feel the sting of sun. You pause briefly in the shadow of a large boulder, allowing the flock to pass slowly by. Some sheep rub against the stone, scratching their sides. Their wool leaves smudges of dust on the rock, faint white streaks like careless brushstrokes. You step out again, guiding the last stragglers forward. The path grows narrow, the rocks sharper. One sheep stumbles, regains balance, and trots quickly to catch up with the others. You keep your staff ready, knowing another stumble might not end so lightly. The Judean hills are not forgiving, yet they are familiar. You know their ridges, their gullies, their sudden turns. You know where the ground gives way underfoot, where grass still lingers after rain, where the shadows stretch longest in afternoon. To others, this land might appear harsh, even empty. To you, it is a living map, read not with ink but with memory. And so the morning continues, the flock pressing across rocky paths, your staff knocking rhythm, your sandals scraping stone, and the sun climbing steadily, marking another day in a shepherd's long, unremarkable yet essential journey. By now the sheep have chewed their fill of the rocky slopes, and their bleating turns to restless murmurs. They want water. You can sense it before they scatter too far, before the lambs start nudging their mothers impatiently. You know the rhythm of their bodies as well as you know the rhythm of your own breathing. The flock must drink, and that means guiding them toward one of the few precious springs tucked between the hills. The path narrows as you descend into a shallow valley. The ground softens slightly here, sand mixing with stone, and the air grows cooler. You can almost smell water before you see it, faint hints of damp earth that cut through the dryness. The sheep smell it too. Their pace quickens, hooves clattering against rock, heads lifting as they sniff the breeze. You call sharply to keep them from bolting. Thirst can turn even these docile creatures into a chaotic stampede if you're not careful. At last you hear the trickle. It's not much, just a thread of sound weaving between rocks. You step forward, staff raised, and there it is, a spring no wider than a man's arm, seeping from the hillside into a shallow basin carved out by years of hooves and tongues. The water is not crystal clear. It's muddied, stirred with silt, but it is life. You hold the flock back at first, using your staff to keep the eager ones from rushing forward and trampling each other. The lambs bleat plaintively, small voices rising over the crowd. You let a few of the older ewes go first, lowering their heads to lap quickly, and the others follow in a more orderly fashion. Their tongues lap noisily, water dripping from their muzzles, darkening the soil around their feet. As you watch, you kneel beside the basin and cup your hands into the cool trickle. The water is earthy, tinged with minerals, but refreshing. You drink slowly, then fill your water skin carefully, letting drops spill over your fingers. The sound of animals drinking fills the air, a chorus of lapping, splashing, and impatient shoves. You glance around the clearing. This spring is not yours alone. It belongs to every shepherd who passes through. Already you notice faint tracks in the mud, the prints of other flocks, the narrow lines of sandals pressed into damp earth. In the distance, a thin plume of smoke curls upward from a ridge, perhaps a campfire from another herder. You know you may not be alone here for long. Mainstream historians often note that springs like these served as gathering points, not only for flocks but for people. They became informal meeting places where trade occurred, alliances formed, and sometimes disputes sparked into conflict. In arid lands, water is power, and a trickle like this could mean life or death for entire herds. You think back to tales of disputes at wells, shepherds arguing over whose flock arrived first, whose animals had rights to drink, even scuffles breaking out until elders intervened. One old story tells of a shepherd who placed his staff in the ground beside a spring and declared it a boundary marker, daring anyone to cross it. Historians still argue whether such stories reflect common practice or were embellished moral lessons about sharing resources. Either way, you know that water stirs human tempers as surely as it soothes animal thirst. For now, though, the clearing is peaceful. The sheep crowd shoulder to shoulder, drinking greedily. Their muzzles drip, their wool dampened in patches. The lambs clamber awkwardly to reach the edge, splashing more than sipping, their bleats sharp with need. You guide them gently, crouching to nudge one with your hand until its tiny mouth finds the shallowest pool. As you wait, you watch the spring itself. Water has always fascinated you. The way it bubbles up from hidden places, unseen rivers winding beneath stone. Some shepherds believe springs are gifts from the divine, tiny miracles feeding those patient enough to find them. Others say they are the veins of the earth, lifeblood seeping to the surface. You don't argue either way. You simply know that without them, you and your flock would not last long. You take the moment to rest, sitting back against a stone, cloak gathered around your knees. The sun climbs higher overhead, but here in the hollow, the air is gentler, cooled by the damp earth. The sheep quiet as their thirst eases, some already nosing grass along the spring's edges. Their calm soothes you. For a rare few minutes, you are not driving them forward or guarding against danger. You are simply sharing space with them, equal in your need for water. Here is a quirky tidbit that drifts into your mind. Some shepherds believe that sheep can smell water from great distances, far better than humans can. You've seen evidence that supports it. Once, while wandering across barren hills, your flock suddenly veered toward a hidden gully, where sure enough a spring trickled unseen. Whether it's instinct, memory, or something else, you've learned to trust their noses more than your own. Historians still argue about whether such behavior is genuine water-sensing ability, or just familiarity with roots, passed down by generations of herds. Either way, it's another reminder that the sheep guide you as much as you guide them. You let your eyes close briefly, listening to the rhythmic sound of lapping. The world shrinks to water and wool, to earth and breath. For this moment, nothing else matters. Tomorrow may bring danger, evening may bring exhaustion. But now, as the flock drinks under the brightening sky, you are simply part of the cycle. Guardian, wanderer, and fellow creature of thirst. The sheep are still lingering near the spring when you hear it, a low whistle that is not your own, rising and falling in a pattern different from the calls you've trained your flock to obey. You glance up sharply, hand tightening around the staff. Sure enough, across the ridge, another figure appears, silhouetted by the climbing sun. His cloak is similar to yours, patched in places, heavy against the wind. A crook-shaped staff leans on his shoulder, and just behind him a trail of sheep winds down the slope like a moving ribbon of white and brown. This is no surprise. Springs are natural magnets, and no shepherd can claim them exclusively. You relax a little, but you keep your flock clustered close, nudging the more curious lambs back from the edges. Flocks mix easily, and once they do, sorting them apart becomes a headache that can last hours. The other shepherd raises a hand in greeting, a gesture more weary than friendly, but respectful enough. You raise your staff slightly in return. Words are not necessary at first. The simple acknowledgement is enough. Still, as his sheep begin to crowd the far side of the spring, the man steps closer, and conversation inevitably begins. He comments on the heat, as if the sun were not obvious to both of you. You respond in kind, mentioning the limp in one of your sheep. It is small talk, but in these hills, small talk is survival. A shepherd's life is lonely, and any human voice feels like a gift. Soon enough, You exchange bits of news. How one village recently had to repair its well. How a caravan passed through carrying spices and bright cloth. How wolves have been prowling more boldly near the olive groves. These fragments of information travel faster through shepherds than through merchants. After all, shepherds are scattered everywhere, eyes and ears on every slope. The sheep mingle cautiously at the edges of the spring. You and the other shepherd are careful to keep them mostly separate, whistling and tapping staffs when they get too tangled. Still, one away from your flock wanders over, drawn by curiosity. The other shepherd chuckles, remarking that your sheep seem restless. You shrug, returning the joke. Maybe she just prefers your water better. The exchange earns a dry laugh. Humor is scarce in the hills, but when it comes, it feels genuine. Mainstream history notes that shepherds often formed loose networks, trading favors and information across wide territories. They shared grazing grounds, borrowed tools, and sometimes even exchanged sheep to balance out flocks. Yet they also competed fiercely, especially in lean seasons when grass grew thin. It was a delicate balance. Camaraderie one day, rivalry the next. Historians still argue whether these relationships leaned more toward friendship or suspicion. From your perspective, it depends on the day, the man, and the hunger of the sheep. As the conversation flows, you trade something small, a scrap of cloth for wrapping bread in exchange for a length of sinew cord he no longer needs. Neither of you gains much, but trade is less about value than about maintaining goodwill. Better to part on a friendly note than to sow bitterness in a land where paths cross often and grudges linger long. A quirky memory comes to mind. You once knew a shepherd who claimed he could tell stories so boring that even wolves fell asleep listening. He would sit by the fire at night and recite genealogies, father to son, tribe to clan, until the rest of you groaned in protest. Yet you all listened, because even boredom felt better than silence. You almost mention this story to your companion today, but you hold it back. Not every man appreciates being compared to a wolf-snoring storyteller. The sun climbs higher, pushing shadows toward the rocks. The other shepherd wipes sweat from his brow, adjusts his cloak, and calls his flock together. His whistle is sharp and distinct, a sound that cuts through the murmurs of sheep. One by one, his animals lift their heads and shuffle after him, pulling away from the spring. You watch with practiced eyes, noting how his sheep obey. Every shepherd's call is unique, and sheep learn to recognize the voice of their own guardian. Outsiders might think all bleats and whistles sound the same, but you know better. It is a language written in pitch, tone, and habit. As he departs, the man calls back a brief farewell. His voice carries across the hollow, swallowed quickly by the dry air. You return the farewell, raising your staff again. Then, just like that, the encounter is over. He disappears into the distance, swallowed by hills, his flock trailing like a shadow. Your own sheep return to grazing quietly, content after their drink. The lambs rest in the shade of a boulder, flanks rising and falling in shallow breaths. For a brief while, you sit and let the silence settle. The world shrinks again to your flock, your staff, and the endless land. Encounters like this punctuate the monotony, reminding you that you are not the only wanderer in these hills. Yet solitude always reclaims you in the end. The sun has climbed high enough that it burns the back of your neck, and already you can feel the sweat clinging beneath your cloak. The sheep lie in patches of shade or stand lazily chewing, their stomachs round from grazing and their thirst satisfied. This is the slowest part of the day, when the land itself seems to pause, suspended between the urgency of morning and the long drift toward evening. You lower yourself onto a flat rock, setting the staff across your knees. The stone radiates warmth through your cloak, and for a moment you just breathe, watching dust swirl lazily in the air. It is in times like this, when there is nothing immediate to do, no pressing danger, no urgent thirst, that stories and songs surface. As natural as the wind sighing through the grass, you hum first, almost absent-mindedly. A tune your mother once sang, a lullaby meant to calm restless children in the dark. The notes wander, carried off by the breeze, and a few sheep lift their heads curiously before resuming their chewing. You smile faintly. They are your audience now, whether they like it or not. The words of old psalms come next, whispered under your breath. Songs of praise, of lament, of longing for deliverance. You do not sing loudly. The land does not need volume. Instead, your voice mingles with the cicadas, low and steady, like water running unseen beneath stone. Historians still argue whether shepherds were the original composers of such hymns, their endless hours birthing poetry that later generations claimed as sacred. You don't know the answer, but you know the comfort of words spilling into open air. The way they make loneliness feel less heavy than the stories arrive. Not rehearsed, not polished, but remembered fragments from firesides and marketplaces. You recall tales of ancient kings who began as shepherds themselves, boys plucking harp strings beside their flocks, later crowned and burdened with kingdoms. You wonder if those kings ever missed the simplicity of counting sheep instead of counting enemies. There is a quirky memory you chuckle over. One old shepherd used to claim that sheep could see angels. He swore that whenever his flock suddenly froze and stared at nothing, they were gazing at unseen messengers. The rest of you laughed at him, teasing that maybe the angels only appeared to sheep, because they couldn't bear the smell of shepherds. Still, you catch yourself watching your own flock sometimes, wondering if their sudden stillness means something more than nerves. The sun beats harder, forcing you to shift into a scrap of shade beside a rock. You tear a piece of bread from the cloth in your pouch, chewing slowly, washing it down with a sip from the water skin. The taste is dry, plain, yet grounding. You offer a crumb to a lamb nosing near your feet. It sniffs, decides it prefers grass, and wanders off. Sheep are never impressed with human food. As you eat, your mind drifts again into storytelling. You rehearse genealogies, who begot whom, which ancestor wandered where, how tribes split and merged. The rhythm is like counting sheep, endless and oddly soothing. It's the kind of story that would bore a child to sleep. but in the silence of the hills, it fills the emptiness. Your thoughts shift to debates you once overheard in a village. Elders arguing whether shepherds should be considered noble for their endurance or lowly for their dirt. One insisted that shepherds were close to the divine, their solitude sharpening wisdom. Another scoffed, calling them vagabonds who slept with animals. Historians still argue the same point centuries later, though you doubt either camp ever lived a day in your sandals. The afternoon deepens, and the land feels heavy with heat. Even the insects slow, their buzzing more sluggish, as if the air itself resists movement. Your flock sprawls across the sparse grass, panting softly, their sides heaving. You watch them with the patience that shepherding teaches. Patience not as a virtue, but as necessity. Out here, time stretches whether you will it or not. You hum again, softer this time, the melody looping without end. Maybe you're not entertaining angels or kings or even sheep. Maybe you're only entertaining yourself, keeping your mind from unraveling under the sun. Still, the sound comforts you, weaving into the heat-hazed stillness like a thin thread holding the day together. The lull of midday has a way of tricking you. For a while, everything feels still, so still that you almost believe the day will pass without interruption. But a shepherd knows better. Stillness can shatter quickly, and vigilance is the thread that keeps a flock intact. Even as you hum your quiet songs, even as you chew the last crumbs of bread, one ear remains tuned for what does not belong. You rise from your shaded rock, brushing crumbs from your cloak, and take up the staff again. The sheep sprawl lazily, their coats warm beneath the sun, but you pace slowly around them, scanning the ridges. You know the land well enough to read its silences. A bird flying off suddenly can mean something stirred in the brush. The absence of cicadas can mean something slithered too close. Your eyes and ears sharpen, though your movements remain unhurried. Sheep read fear quickly. Panic in you is panic in them. A faint rustle carries on the wind. You stop, tilting your head. It could be nothing. The shift of leaves, the tumble of a small rock. But it could also be something with teeth. You walk toward the sound, staff ready, sling already coiled loosely in your hand. Your pouch of stones presses reassuringly against your hip. There's no wolf yet, no jackal lunging from the shadows. Instead, a snake coils lazily across a patch of warm rock, its body gleaming in the sunlight. You watch it with cautious respect. Most snakes here are not deadly, but some are. A bite could kill a lamb, or at least cause enough swelling to cripple it. With a flick of your sling, you send a stone cracking against the ground near the snake. It jerks, startled, then slides quickly into a crevice, its scales disappearing like water pouring into sand. You exhale, tension easing. Another quiet threat, handled. You return to the flock, noting how most of them remained blissfully unaware. A few lambs bleat nervously, sensing your alertness more than the snake itself. You pat one on the back, murmuring reassurance. They do not understand your words, but they understand your calm tone. Mainstream historians often note that shepherds became experts in reading subtle cues, the way sheep shifted, the way birds flew, the way silence itself could warn of danger. It was not mystical, just practiced observation honed by endless days in the wilderness. Yet those same habits wove their way into metaphors, stories of shepherds who saw threats long before others did. Historians still argue whether the shepherd's reputation as a watcher was earned purely from necessity or embroidered later by storytellers who loved symbolism. The day stretches onward, the sun glaring overhead. Sweat stings your eyes, and your throat is already dry, despite your careful rationing of the waterskin. You keep moving among the sheep anyway, staff tapping occasionally against a flank, guiding stragglers back toward the group. Your thoughts drift toward predators again. You remember stories of wolves striking in broad daylight, bold enough to charge straight into a flock. Once, years ago, you saw a pack circling, their yellow eyes gleaming as they tested the edges. You had shouted, waved your cloak, hurled stone after stone with your sling. The sheep panicked, bleating and scattering, but by some miracle, only one was lost that day. Even now, you can hear the echoes of their howls if you close your eyes. There is a quirky little superstition you recall. Some shepherds believe that tying a red cord around a lamb's neck wards off wolves, as though the color itself frightens predators. You tried it once as a boy, and sure enough, the lamb survived. But then again, so did all the others without cords. Still, the memory lingers, and sometimes you wonder if you should try it again. Not because you believe in the charm, but because hope, however silly, is better than none. You sit on your haunches near the edge of the flock, sling resting across your knees. The sheep graze lazily, tails flicking at flies. A breeze stirs the dust, carrying faint scents of thyme and sage. It almost feels peaceful again, almost safe. But you keep your eyes on the horizon, because peace for a shepherd is never permanent. It is only the pause between one problem and the next. The land itself feels like it is watching. Hills crouch like sleeping giants, gullies gape like open mouths. Somewhere out there, danger is waiting. You may not see it today, but you will see it again soon. Until then, your staff, your sling, and your patience remain ready, constant companions in a life where vigilance is the only guarantee. The flock is restless again. You can feel it in the way their bodies shift, in the scattered bleats that ripple like small waves through the group. It is never surprising. Sheep are creatures of impulse, forever wandering after the faintest hint of greener pasture. And sure enough, one young lamb has already tested the boundaries of your patience. You spot it darting away, nimble on spindly legs, slipping between two rocks before you can bark out a command. The rest of the flock barely notices. They are too busy chewing in their own little worlds. But your eyes follow the runaway immediately. A shepherd knows that a single lost sheep can cost hours, even an entire day, if not retrieved quickly. And the further it wanders, the more dangers it invites. You sigh, tucking the staff beneath your arm and setting off after it. The lamb is easy to track at first, a white blur weaving between brown rocks. You call sharply, your voice bouncing against the cliffs, but of course it ignores you. Sheep never heed your calls when you want them to. They only listen when they choose to, and even then, only inconsistently. The lamb scrambles upward, determined to reach a patch of grass growing out of a crack in the stones. You clamber after it, sandals slipping on gravel. Your cloak snags briefly on a thorn, and you yank it free, muttering under your breath. Sweat prickles your brow, and the sun beats hard on your neck. But you push forward. This is the shepherd's dance. Patience mixed with annoyance, pursuit mixed with protection. Finally, you corner the lamb in a narrow gully. Its sides heave as it pants, eyes wide, ears twitching nervously. You crouch low, murmuring softly, your voice meant to calm. Slowly, you extend the crook of your staff, hooking it gently around the lamb's chest. It struggles, bleating sharply, but you draw it closer, gathering it into your arms. Its wool is warm and dusty, its tiny hooves scrabbling against your cloak. You press it to your chest, patting its side until it stills. You carry it back down the slope, muttering half-scolding, half-soothing words, as though the lamb understands. In truth, the talking is for you. A way to ease your irritation, to make light of the constant frustrations of shepherding. The flock looks up as you return, some lifting their heads in mild curiosity, others too focused on chewing to care. You set the lamb back down near its mother, who bleats once in recognition before nudging it firmly. The lamb quiets, head dipping again toward grass, as though nothing happened. Mainstream historians often note how sheep's tendency to wander made them perfect metaphors for human behavior in religious texts. Creatures needing constant guidance, easily distracted, prone to danger without a leader. You can't argue with the metaphor. Living it daily makes the comparison too obvious. Still, it amuses you that people use sheep to illustrate human folly, while rarely acknowledging the patience required of the shepherd himself. A quirky memory surfaces as you watch the lamb settle back into the flock. Once, years ago, you spent half a day chasing a sheep that had strayed farther than usual. When you finally caught it, you discovered it had been lured not by grass, but by the smell of figs in a farmer's orchard. The farmer was furious, shaking his fist and demanding payment for the nibbled leaves. You ended up giving him part of your cloak as compensation, returning home with a bare shoulder until you could patch it. To this day, you still avoid fig orchards with your flock, half out of caution, half out of embarrassment. Historians still argue whether shepherds received fair respect for their work, or whether society consistently dismissed them as nuisances, always blamed for wandering animals. You know the answer from experience. Sometimes you are praised for protecting lives, sometimes scolded for a single damaged fig tree. The truth shifts like the shadows of clouds across the hills. The sun tilts westward now, the day sliding toward its long afternoon stretch. The lamb's adventure is already forgotten, but you feel the wear of the chase in your legs. You lean against your staff, catching your breath, eyes sweeping the flock again. They graze in peaceful ignorance, unaware of how close one of them came to becoming a wolf's lunch or a broken carcass in a gully. You shake your head with a tired smile. This is the life of a shepherd. Not glorious battles, not heroic victories, but constant, mundane rescues. 1,000 little errands of patience and persistence. Each lost sheep is a story, each retrieval a reminder. You can never turn your back for long. And as the shadows lengthen slowly across the hills, you know it is only a matter of time before another lamb tests your vigilance again. Your stomach reminds you it has been working since dawn without reward. It begins with a hollow ache, then sharp little reminders that pull your thoughts from sheep and stones toward the simple matter of food. Shepherds do not feast, they subsist. You reach into the leather pouch tied at your waist and draw out the cloth bundle, its edges stiff with dust and sweat. Inside lies the predictable meal. A small round of coarse bread, slightly hardened by the sun, and a handful of olives, their skins wrinkled but still glistening with oil. You sit on a flat stone, cloak gathered around your legs, and break the bread in two. It does not flake delicately like the loaves of wealthier homes. It tears unevenly, crumbs scattering into your beard. You chew slowly, letting your teeth work through its toughness. The taste is earthy, flavored more by grain husks than flour, but hunger makes every bite welcome. You chase it with an olive, biting carefully around the pit, savoring the burst of salty oil against your tongue. The sheep mill lazily around you, some lying down, others cropping the sparse grass near the rocks. The air is heavy now, sun pressing down like a hand on your shoulders. You can feel the weight of heat through your cloak, sweat tracing lines down your back. Even the cicadas seem to buzz more sluggishly, as if the day itself has grown tired. You sip from the waterskin, tilting it carefully. The leather creaks, the water inside warm but soothing. You ration every swallow, conscious that the spring you left may be the last for hours. Your lips are dry, your throat already tight, but you take only enough to keep moving. Out here, discipline keeps you alive as much as vigilance. Mainstream historians point out that the shepherd's diet was often simple and repetitive: bread, olives, dried figs, sometimes a bit of goat cheese, and water or watered wine when available. Meat was rare, usually reserved for festivals or emergencies. You nod unconsciously at the thought, biting again into the bread. Simplicity is not always glamorous, but it is dependable. A quirky memory surfaces. You once saw a shepherd try to roast a grasshopper on a stick as a joke. The poor creature shriveled instantly, its smell sharp and bitter. But the man insisted it tasted nutty. To everyone's surprise, he wasn't entirely wrong. Later, others tried it too, half in jest, half in curiosity. Some even claimed it was a practical snack when food was scarce. Historians still argue whether insects were a common staple in these hills, or just an occasional dare among boardmen. You've never developed the taste, though hunger might change that one day. The shade shifts, forcing you to move slightly, seeking even a sliver of relief from the burning sun. You wrap your cloak loosely around your head, creating a rough hood. The fabric scratches your ears, but it shields your scalp from the worst of the heat. The sheep, for their part, handle the weather in silence, panting faintly but showing no panic. Their resilience is humbling. They endure without complaint, their thick wool insulating them against both cold nights and scorching days. You finish the last of the bread, brushing crumbs from your hands. The olives are gone too, leaving only the faint, oily sheen on your fingers, which you wipe against your cloak. Your meal was small, hardly more than a pause, yet it carries enough strength to push you into the afternoon. You sit a moment longer, savoring the quiet fullness, watching dust motes swirl in the heavy air. Historians still argue whether shepherds saw their midday meals as sacred pauses or merely as interruptions in endless labor. Some suggest these moments were when songs and prayers took root, when gratitude rose despite scarcity. You understand both sides. Sometimes the meal feels holy, a communion with the land and its creator. Other times it feels like chewing dryness, another necessity in a life of necessities. Today it leans toward gratitude. Hunger was met, thirst eased, and the flock remains safe. The sheep stir again, some rising to move toward new patches of grass. You stretch your legs, rising slowly, staff in hand. The meal is over, the sun still climbs, and the afternoon awaits. There is no rush. Shepherding is never rushed, but there is always the steady pull of time. Bread and olives may not feel like much, but they are enough to carry you into the long hours ahead, where heat and silence will test your patience once more. The afternoon settles like a heavy blanket over the hills, pressing down on everything with relentless heat. The sun blazes from directly overhead, no longer casting long, comforting shadows, but standing like an unblinking eye in the sky. You tug your cloak tighter across your shoulders and over your head, not for warmth, but for shade, turning the scratchy wool into a shield against the fire above. Even with this cover, beads of sweat slide into your beard, leaving your mouth dry and parched. The flock feels it too. Their bleats grow softer, less insistent, as if even complaining has become too much effort. Many lie down on the bare earth, legs folded neatly beneath them, panting faintly through open mouths. The lambs nestle into the sides of their mothers, their tiny chests rising and falling with shallow breaths. Those that graze do so lazily, nibbling without urgency, their movements slow and heavy. The land itself seems to echo their stillness. Cicadas hum in long, steady waves, and not even a breeze stirs the air. You sit again on a rock, your staff across your lap. The silence is almost startling. Every small sound seems magnified. A fly buzzing near your ear, the distant clatter of a stone shifting on a slope, the faint click of a sheep's jaw as it chews. Out here, silence is never truly empty. It is filled with details, with the hidden noises of a landscape alive yet subdued. Mainstream historians often remark on how shepherds developed immense patience, not out of virtue but sheer necessity. Days stretched long, filled with hours of nothing but watching, listening, waiting. To city dwellers, this kind of monotony might feel unbearable. Yet you know it as rhythm, the rise and fall of sun, the grazing and resting of sheep, the endless loop of vigilance and stillness. You pull the waterskin once more, tipping it carefully into your mouth. The liquid is warm now, almost unpleasant, but still a blessing. You let it trickle down your throat, each swallow deliberate. The skin is lighter than before, and you weigh it in your hand, already planning how far you must go before finding another spring or well. This, too, is the shepherdess burden, not only guiding the flock, but mapping water across a landscape where scarcity can be merciless. The heat blurs the edges of your vision. Hills shimmer in the distance, their ridges bending and wavering in the haze. You squint, trying to distinguish mirage from reality, reminding yourself that sight is not always trustworthy under such a sun. The sheep, however, seem unfazed. They trust the ground beneath their hooves more than the horizon ahead. Perhaps that is their secret, living only in the patch of grass before them, never worrying about the miles still to come. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you sit, sweat dripping from your brow. You once heard an elder claim that sheep could sense the weather hours before it changed. He insisted that if a flock suddenly grew restless in the heat, it meant rain was coming. You scoffed at the time, but years later you noticed the truth in it. Not always, but often enough to wonder. Historians still argue whether this weather sense was instinct, coincidence, or wishful shepherd superstition. Either way, you pay attention now, even if you never admit it aloud. The land is so quiet that you begin to imagine sounds that aren't there. Your ears play tricks, a phantom whistle, a false rustle, the echo of voices carried on the wind. Loneliness sharpens in these hours, when the mind longs for distraction but the body is too tired to invent it. You find yourself whispering snatches of songs again, half to stay awake, half to remind yourself that you still have a voice. You shift your weight, leaning the staff upright against your shoulder. Your cloak sticks to your skin, damp and uncomfortable. Dust clings to your sandals, and your calves ache from climbing earlier slopes. Still, you stay upright, eyes drifting across the flock. Even in this heat, you cannot sleep. To sleep would be to invite disaster. A wandering lamb, a sudden predator, an accident that could undo hours of careful watching. Historians still argue whether shepherds truly endured such constant vigilance, or whether they found ways to rest, trusting dogs or partners to keep watch. You know that both can be true. Some are lucky enough to share the burden, to lean on a companion's eyes. But for you, alone in this heat, vigilance is unbroken. Your eyes may blur, your body may sag, but your awareness stretches like a taut string across the flock, unwilling to snap. The afternoon lengthens, though the sun seems reluctant to move. You wait for the relief of slanting light, the promise of evening breezes, but for now you endure. The sheep endure with you, lying still, panting faintly, their bodies pressing dust into the earth. The silence deepens, stretching thin but unbroken, and you sit among it, a lone figure with staff and cloak, waiting with the patience of stone itself. At last, the merciless weight of the sun begins to ease. Its glare softens, shifting from white-hot intensity to a warmer, golden glow. The shadows lengthen slowly, crawling out from under rocks and sheep alike, stretching across the hills as if the land itself can finally exhale. You feel the relief instantly. The air cools by a fraction, but it is enough to lift the heaviness from your chest and stir your legs back into motion. The sheep sense it too. One by one, they rise from their dusty hollows, shaking themselves as if to rid their coats of heat. The lambs stretch their legs, testing them with awkward skips. Before settling into more measured steps, the flock begins to stir with a quiet energy, bleats breaking the silence as if announcing their readiness to move again. You stand, brushing dust from your cloak, and grip your staff firmly. This is the time to guide them toward safer evening pastures, away from the exposed slopes and into areas where grass lingers longer in shadow. You whistle, a sharp, rising note, and the flock gathers. Slow at first, but gradually forming into a loose wave that follows your lead. The path curves along the side of a ridge. Loose stones clatter under hooves, but the sheep move steadily, driven by instinct as much as your prodding. You keep a close eye on the stragglers, the weaker ones still weary from the heat, coaxing them forward with taps of your staff. The flock is never uniform. Some charge ahead, eager noses low to the ground, while others lag stubbornly, resisting until your whistle sharpens and your staff nudges. Mainstream historians often highlight this evening movement, describing how shepherds used the cooling hours to cover more ground. Morning and evening were the times of activity, with midday reserved for stillness. You nod to yourself at the thought. History books may analyze patterns and rhythms, but you live them with each step, each whistle, each tug of your cloak in the fading light. The land glows now with hues of amber and rose. The stones shimmer less harshly, their edges softened by dusk. A breeze picks up, faint but real, carrying with it the smell of sage and wild thyme crushed beneath hooves. The sheep follow it, noses twitching, eager for the promise of greener patches hidden in gullies where moisture lingers. You guide them there, your eyes scanning for both opportunity and danger. Once, years ago, you led your flock too far into a gully at dusk, chasing greener grass. The shadows hid a jackal pack, and the sudden chaos nearly cost you half your sheep. You never forgot the sound of their growls blending with panicked bleats, nor the terror of stones flying from your sling in desperate arcs. Since then, you keep to higher ground in evenings, choosing safety over abundance. Quirky as it sounds, some shepherds say jackals have a taste for twilight, that they prefer to strike when shadows confuse sheep. Historians still argue whether this is genuine predator behavior or just another shepherd's superstition born of hard nights. Either way, you take no chances. As you crest another ridge, you pause to watch the flocks scatter across a broader plain. The grass here is not lush, but it is enough. The sheep lowered their heads, grazing quickly, as though aware that darkness is coming and their window of feeding is short. You let them eat, leaning on your staff, cloak pulled tighter against the cooling breeze. The day's fatigue seeps into your bones, yet you feel steadier now than you did under the midday sun. Evening, though tiring, carries a kind of calm, a rhythm that says survival has once again been achieved. You take a small sip from the water skin, almost empty now. The taste is flat, but it soothes your cracked lips. Tomorrow you will need to refill it again. At a spring, a well, or perhaps from a villager kind enough to share. For now, you let the last drops slide down your throat and savor the faint relief. The sky above shifts in color, blue deepening toward violet, streaked with orange at the edges. A bird wheels high overhead, heading toward its own roost. The sheep graze in silhouettes against the fading light, their movements rhythmic, their sounds blending into the chorus of evening. You watch them, staff tapping lightly against the ground. A shepherd alone, yet surrounded, weary yet anchored by the same cycle that has guided countless before you. Evening pastures are not glamorous, but they are safe enough. And in a shepherd's world, safe is always more precious than plenty. The sun dips lower, its fiery disk sliding behind the western ridges, and the land begins its slow surrender to dusk. This is the time to turn the flock back toward the village, guiding them from the open pastures to the outskirts where walls, gates, and human voices promise safety. The sheep resist at first. They always do. Noses still buried in the last tufts of grass, you whistle sharply, clapping your staff against a rock, and gradually they begin to shift. One turns, then another, until the whole mass flows reluctantly in your wake. The path downward is familiar, a track etched by countless hooves and sandals. Dust rises beneath the shuffle, glowing briefly in the last streaks of orange light. The hills around you deepen into shadow, their rugged outlines now softened, almost gentle. You know better, though. Darkness hides both safety and danger. The sooner you reach the village's edge, the better. The flock presses onward, their bleats rising as if they too feel the pull of home. Dogs bark faintly in the distance, sharp notes carried on the evening air. The sheep respond with eager movement, their pace quickening. They know those sounds as surely as they know your whistle. A shepherd may lead, but instinct always pulls them toward familiar ground. You crest a final rise, and the village appears below, clustered homes of stone and mud brick glowing faintly in the dying light. Smoke curls from hearths, and the faint murmur of human voices drifts upward. Children laugh somewhere near the gates, their high-pitched shouts carrying farther than adult conversation. You feel a strange mixture of relief and weariness. The day is nearly done, but not finished yet. The first figures appear at the outskirts. Children racing forward, their bare feet kicking up dust. They greet the sheep with shrieks of joy, darting in and out of the flock with fearless playfulness. One boy claps his hands loudly, pretending to guide the sheep like a miniature shepherd. You chuckle under your breath, though you keep your staff steady, warding off the possibility of a startled Away trampling him. Dogs join the commotion next, lean, sharp-edged creatures darting along the edges of the flock. They bark and circle, driving stragglers back toward the group. The sheep bleat louder now, unsettled by the sudden flurry of noise, but the dogs know their work well. You call out once, sharp but measured, and the dogs respond by easing their pressure, nipping only where necessary. The partnership between shepherd and dog is unspoken, ancient. They guard what you cannot guard alone. see what you might miss in the dimming light. An elder sits by the gate, leaning on a stick of his own. His eyes squint against the fading sun as he watches the flock approach. He nods once in acknowledgement, not effusive but steady. Approval is rarely loud among your people. A nod suffices, carrying more weight than a dozen words. You nod back, guiding the sheep into the familiar lanes. Mainstream historians often note how villages depended on shepherds for wool, milk, and meat, yet rarely gave them full honor in return. Shepherds were needed but not celebrated, trusted but kept at arm's length. You feel that contradiction even here, at the village gates. The people welcome the flocks, return more than they welcome you. Still, you accept it. Sheep are your language, your purpose, your contribution. Children dart closer, tugging at your cloak. One asks if you fought off any wolves today, his eyes wide with hope for an exciting tale. You grin faintly, shaking your head. Only a snake, you admit, and his face falls in disappointment. To him, snakes are dull compared to wolves. You consider exaggerating but decide against it. Let him learn in time that most days are not filled with grand battles, but with patience and dust. A quirky memory surfaces as you pass through the gate. Years ago, one shepherd claimed his sheep knew the sound of the village women grinding grain, and would quicken their pace at the faintest rhythm of stone on stone. You laughed at the time, but tonight, as the bleating grows louder at the scent of hearth smoke, you wonder if there wasn't some truth to the story. Historians still argue whether animals respond to such domestic cues or whether it's only shepherds, weary from travel, projecting their own eagerness for home. The flock spreads into the outer pens, hemmed by low stone walls. Their hooves clatter against packed earth as they settle, some lying immediately, others nudging forward to be near familiar sheep. The noise is chaotic, but you've heard it countless times. It is the music of day's end, a sound that says the work is nearly finished. You lean on your staff, cloak heavy with dust, and watch the flock settle. The village hums in the background. Children called home by mothers. Fires crackling, the faint ring of a hammer as someone finishes a day's labor. The air smells of smoke and bread, a sharp contrast to the dust and sweat you've carried since dawn. For a moment, you simply stand, caught between the wild solitude of the hills and the crowded safety of the village. Both belong to you, and yet neither entirely claims you. The last of the flock shuffles into the stone pens, their bodies pressing together in a mass of wool and dust. The noise is loud at first, a chorus of bleats echoing off walls, punctuated by the scuffle of hooves. But soon the animals begin to quiet. They nudge for space, they settle, and one by one they lower themselves onto the packed earth, chewing in slow contentment. You close the gate with a heavy wooden bar, sliding it firmly into place. The day's work of guarding and guiding has reached its end. You lean your staff against the wall and roll your shoulders, stiff from the long hours of walking. The air is cooler now, evening breezes slipping between the houses, carrying smoke from cooking fires. A faint sweetness lingers, maybe from figs roasting somewhere nearby, mixed with the sharper smell of charred wood. Your stomach growls, but you push the thought aside. First, there is the shepherd's last ritual of the day, settling in by the fire. You find a patch of ground just outside the pens, where a small circle of stones marks the place where shepherds often rest. You crouch, gathering dry twigs, brush, and a few larger branches, laying them carefully in the circle. With practiced ease, you strike sparks from flint and iron, coaxing a flame from the brittle tinder. Soon the fire catches, crackling softly, its glow painting your hands and staff in flickering gold. The sheep respond to the fire as they always do, not with fear, but with a curious hush. The faint light comforts them, as though reminding them that their shepherd is still awake, still watching. You sit close enough to feel the heat on your legs, pulling your cloak tighter around your shoulders as the night air grows cooler. From within the village walls, voices drift. A woman calls to her children, her tone sharp but affectionate. A man laughs loudly at some joke, the sound carrying in bursts. The clang of a jar being set on stone echoes faintly. You are near enough to hear life, but not fully part of it. That distance is familiar, even comfortable. You belong to the flock more than the village. The pen is your hall, the fire your hearth. You draw the last of your provisions from the pouch. A small scrap of cheese, hardened at the edges, but still edible. You cut it with your simple knife, nibbling slowly, savoring the tempts. Beside you, the fire pops, throwing sparks that drift into the night. You drink the final drops of water from your skin, the leather collapsing flat in your hands. Tomorrow you will need to fill it again. Tonight you make do. Mainstream historians often write that shepherds used fire not only for warmth and cooking, but also as a shield against predators. Flames kept wolves at bay, their glow unsettling to creatures lurking in the dark. You believe it. You have seen shadows circle at the edges of firelight, eyes glinting before fading into the black. Yet you also know fire soothes humans most of all, giving the illusion of control against a world that is far larger than your reach. You poke at the embers with your staff, watching sparks jump. The heat eases the stiffness in your knees, the weariness in your back. Fatigue settles heavier now, the kind that comes not from one great effort, but from thousands of small ones stacked together. Every whistle, every step, every glance at the horizon. A quirky memory flickers as you watch the flames. One shepherd once claimed that sheep preferred to sleep when their shepherd hummed by the fire. He insisted it wasn't the tune, but the vibration in the air, like a lullaby woven into the night. You scoffed at the time, but tonight you find yourself humming anyway, soft and low. And whether by coincidence or truth, the flock seems to quiet even further. Their bleats fading until only the occasional rustle breaks the silence. Historians still argue whether such practices were real tradition or just shepherds amusing themselves with superstition. But in the hush of night, it feels real enough. The stars appear slowly, first faint pinpricks, then scattered clusters filling the sky. You tilt your head back, gazing at constellations that have guided wanderers for generations. Some you know by name, passed down in stories. Others you recognize only by their steady presence, constant in their shining. The night sky feels endless, far larger than your flock, your fire, or your life. And yet, lying beneath it, you feel both small and steady, part of a cycle stretching back farther than memory. The fire crackles, the sheep breathe steadily, the village hum softens into sleep. You wrap the cloak around yourself, staff resting at your side, and settle into the quiet. The work of the day is done. Tomorrow will bring its own hunger, its own wandering, its own dangers. But for now, under the watchful stars, you let your body rest in the warmth of firelight, content in the simple victory of another day survived. The fire dies down to a quiet glow, the flames shrinking into glowing embers that pulse gently in the circle of stones. You pull your cloak tighter around your body, tucking your knees beneath the wool, and lie back against the ground. The earth is hard, but it is familiar, the same bed you've known more nights than you can count. Above you, the sky has fully opened into its nighttime brilliance, thick with stars scattered across the black like grains of salt spilled on dark cloth. The flock rustles faintly in the pen beside you. A soft bleat rises here and there, quickly answered, but mostly they are still now. Their day of grazing and wandering having drained the restlessness from their bodies. Their warmth lingers in the air, a collective heat that mingles with the faint scent of lanolin and dust. You find the sound of their breathing oddly comforting, steady, low, like waves rolling against a distant shore. You set your staff on the ground within arm's reach. It has been your companion all day, and it remains your companion even in sleep. To lie without it would feel incomplete, as if a part of yourself were missing. The sling rests coiled beside it, pouch filled with the smooth stones you've carried since morning. Tools of vigilance by day, silent guardians by night. The night air is cool, a stark contrast to the heavy heat of midday. A faint breeze slides down from the hills, carrying with it the scent of sage and the distant smoke of village fires. Somewhere a dog barks once, sharp and brief, then silence swallows it again. You listen intently, heart quickening for a moment, but no answering howl comes. No wolf tonight. Not yet, anyway. Mainstream historians remind us that shepherds often slept lightly, ears tuned to the faintest sound of danger. True sleep came only in fragments, broken by sudden wakefulness to check the flock. You know the truth of it in your bones. Even now, as you lie with your eyes closed, your mind stays half-lit, ready to spring at the rustle of hooves or the echo of growls. It is not restful, but it is survival. You shift on the ground, adjusting the cloak beneath your head. The wool scratches, and a small stone presses into your shoulder, but you are too tired to move again. Weariness wraps around you heavier than the cloak. Your body aches from miles walked, from climbing ridges, from chasing strays. Your throat still feels dry. Your skin still carries the heat of the day, but your mind begins to drift. A quirky old belief drifts with you. Some shepherds said that certain stars were sheep stars, guiding not only men but the flocks themselves, shining brighter to keep animals calm at night. You remember as a child staring at those stars, trying to decide which ones looked more like wool, which shimmered in patterns like a flock spread across a hill. Historians still argue whether shepherds truly relied on constellations for guidance, or whether such stories were romantic inventions told much later. But here, beneath the sprawling heavens, the stars feel like companions, whether they care for sheep or not. The embers flicker softly, their glow rising and falling with the rhythm of your breathing. You hum once more, almost unconsciously, a tune without words that drifts into the air like smoke. The sheep do not stir, but you imagine they hear it, that it reassures them as they sleep. Perhaps it reassures you even more. Your eyes grow heavy. The stars blur into one another, constellations dissolving into a soft haze. The last thing you see clearly is the arc of the Milky Way stretching across the sky, ancient and eternal, the same sky watched by shepherds before you and by those who will come long after. You close your eyes, surrendering to the night, cloak wrapped tight, staff at your side, flock safe in their pen. And so, with the world finally quiet, you drift into sleep beneath the starlit sky. Now the day fades into nothing more than memory, and the hills of Judea grow soft in the dark. The fire has gone to embers, the sheep are breathing steadily, and the stars above stretch wide and unbroken. Everything has slowed, everything has quieted. You are lying on your cloak, the earth firm beneath you, and the staff rests close at hand, though tonight it does not need to be raised. The flock is safe, the village nearby, and the world outside can wait until morning. The sounds drift further away now. The bleats of the sheep are muffled, distant. The breeze sighs lightly, carrying with it the last smoke of evening fires. Even your own heartbeat begins to slow, falling into rhythm with the stillness around you. There is nothing left to do. No more paths to walk, no more stones to step over, no more lambs to chase or wolves to fear. The work of the day has ended, and the long rest of night has begun. Let your body sink as the shepherd's body sinks, heavy with weariness but surrounded by calm. Picture the stars above, shimmering gently, their light old and steady. Picture the flock gathered in the pen, their warmth pressed together, their breathing like one long sigh. And picture yourself lying there among them, a small part of a greater silence, watched over by sky and earth alike. Everything is safe. Everything is quiet. The long day is done, and the night is kind. Drift with the shepherd into his sleep. Let the sky close around you, and let your thoughts fade like embers cooling to ash.